What is the origin of the solar system? It began not with light, but with silence, a vast and endless darkness where time itself seemed to drift without purpose, until somewhere in the cold abyss, a whisper of motion stirred within a cloud so immense it defied imagination. A drifting nebula of dust and frozen gas, remnants of ancient stars that had lived, burned, and died long before memory could exist. And within this cloud, something changed, a subtle imbalance, a disturbance perhaps born from a distant explosion with a passing gravity of something unseen. And the particles that once floated aimlessly began to fall inward, drawn together by a force both gentle and relentless, gravity weaving invisible threads that pulled the cloud tighter and tighter, until what was once diffuse and silent became a slow and spiraling storm, a cosmic whirlpool where dust collided with dust, where fragments clung together, where heat began to rise from the friction of creation itself. And at the center of this growing chaos, a core formed, dense and brightening, its pressure building with every passing moment, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable to occur. And then it happened, not with a sound, but with a transformation so powerful it reshaped everything around it, as the core ignited into a newborn star, a blazing sphere of nuclear fire that pushed back the darkness and cast its first light into the swirling disk that surrounded it. The birth of the sun, radiant and violent, its energy surging outward in waves that sculpted the remaining cloud into a flattened plain of dust and debris, spinning faster and faster as the center grew stronger. And within that spinning disk, countless particles began their own quiet journeys, colliding, merging, breaking apart, and reforming in an endless dance of creation, where every impact carried both destruction and possibility. And over time, those fragments grew larger, becoming planetesimals, the first seeds of worlds, wandering through the glowing haze as they gathered mass and influence, pulling smaller debris into their growing bodies, shaping themselves through collision and heat, until some became large enough to dominate their paths, clearing their orbits like silent rulers in a chaotic kingdom. And among them, the inner worlds formed in the fierce heat close to the sun, rocky and molten, their surfaces scarred by impacts and reshaped by internal fire. While farther out, where the cold reigned, massive giants took shape, gathering gas and ice into colossal spheres that would one day command vast systems of moons, each region of the disk telling a different story, each orbit holding a different destiny, and yet all bound by the same origin, the same collapsing cloud that had once drifted in darkness. And as millions of years passed, the violence began to settle, the collisions grew less frequent, the orbits more stable, and the newborn solar system slowly emerged from its chaotic infancy into something recognizable, a star surrounded by worlds, each carrying the memory of fire and collision within its core, each shaped by the same ancient forces that had once turned silence into motion. And though the dust had mostly cleared, echoes of that origin remained in the asteroid belts and distant comets, frozen fragments of a time when nothing was certain and everything was becoming, silent witnesses to a story written in gravity and flame. And if one could drift back through time to that moment of origin, they would not see a neat system of planets circling a calm star, but a storm of unimaginable scale, a place where light was born from collapse and order emerged from chaos, a place where every world that now exists was once nothing more than a fragment in a cloud, waiting to be pulled into existence. And even now, in the steady glow of the sun and the quiet motion of the planets, that origin still lingers, hidden in their composition, their orbits, and their scars. A reminder that everything stable was once wild, everything complete was once forming, and everything that exists was once part of something far greater, a drifting cloud in the endless dark that chose, or was compelled, to become something more. And yet the story did not end when the planets took their places, because the young solar system was still restless, still shaping itself in ways both subtle and violent, as the newborn sun pulsed with intense radiation and winds that swept through the remaining dust, clearing vast regions while leaving behind pockets of debris that would wander for billions of years. And among the forming worlds, the early Earth was no peaceful sphere, but a molten landscape of fire and flowing rock, its surface glowing like a wound that had not yet healed, constantly struck by wandering bodies that crossed its path without warning, each impact releasing energy enough to reshape continents before continents even existed. And in one such collision, a wandering protoplanet struck with such force that it tore apart both bodies and cast a halo of debris into orbit. And from that shattered ring, the moon slowly gathered, its pale form coalescing from fragments that once belonged to another world, binding itself to Earth in a silent companionship that would endure across ages. While elsewhere in the system, the giant Jupiter grew immense and dominant, its gravity acting like a gatekeeper that shaped the paths of countless smaller bodies, preventing some from forming into planets and scattering others into distant reaches, leaving behind the fractured remnants we now call the Asteroid Belt, a graveyard of possibilities that never fully became worlds. And beyond, in the cold outskirts, icy fragments were cast outward into a distant halo known as the Oort cloud, a silent reservoir of ancient material that still holds the memory of that early chaos, waiting for the rare moment when gravity will pull one of its members back toward the sun in a long, lonely arc. And as time stretched onward, the violence slowly softened, the surfaces cooled, atmospheres began to form from gases trapped within the planets or delivered by impacts. And on Earth, beneath a sky thick with unfamiliar clouds, the relentless bombardment eased just enough for something new to begin, something fragile and improbable, as oceans condensed from vapor and filled the scars left by fire. And in those dark waters, stirred by energy from the planet's still hot interior and the steady light of the sun, chemistry took its first uncertain steps toward life, a quiet transformation, far less dramatic than the birth of stars, yet infinitely more delicate, as simple molecules found ways to combine, to persist, to replicate, beginning a chain of events that would one day lead to awareness itself. And while this subtle miracle unfolded, the rest of the solar system settled into its enduring rhythm, the planets tracing their paths with increasing precision, each orbit a quiet echo of the spinning disk from which they were born. And though stability had largely replaced chaos, the memory of that origin never truly vanished, for even now, comets still fall inward from the distant dark, meteors still burn through planetary skies, and deep beneath the surfaces of worlds, the heat of formation still lingers, a fading but persistent reminder of a time when everything was molten and uncertain. And if one could stand far beyond the outermost planet and look inward across the vast distances, they would see not just a collection of worlds, but the aftermath of an ancient transformation, a system forged from collapse and collision, held together by gravity and time, and illuminated by a star that was once nothing more than a gathering of dust. And in that view, the solar system would not appear static or complete, but alive in a quiet, enduring way, still evolving, still carrying forward the momentum of its beginning, as if the original cloud had never truly stopped collapsing, but had simply slowed, stretched across billions of years into the steady turning of planets, the silent drifting of distant ice, and the ongoing story of matter becoming something more than it was before.
And in that slow unfolding, deeper currents moved beneath what could be seen, as the invisible pull of gravity continued to guide every motion, linking the smallest drifting particle to the vast presence of the sun, whose steady fusion burned not only as a source of light, but as the quiet engine that held the system together. And though its brilliance seemed constant, it too was changing, imperceptibly brightening over millions of years, altering the balance of warmth across the planets and shaping their futures in ways that would only become clear with time. While on Earth, the once hostile surface cooled enough for continents to harden and drift, carried by slow-moving plates that floated atop a restless interior, and oceans deepened, reflecting a sky that had begun to clear as heavier gases settled and lighter ones escaped. And within those waters, life continued its quiet experiment, diversifying, adapting, learning to harness energy from sunlight and from the planet itself, transforming the atmosphere over eons into something breathable, something dynamic, a thin, shimmering layer that would one day shield fragile creatures from the harshness of space. While far beyond, the giant Saturn gathered its rings not as ornaments, but as remnants of shattered moons and captured debris, a constant reminder that even in apparent calm, destruction still played its role in shaping beauty. And farther still, at the edges of the system, countless icy bodies drifted in near darkness, their orbits influenced by passing stars and the distant tug of the galaxy itself, occasionally sending a lone traveler inward, a comet blazing across the inner worlds as both messenger and relic, carrying within it untouched material from the earliest days, a frozen memory of the time when everything was forming and nothing was fixed. And as ages turned, the solar system found a kind of equilibrium, not a perfect stillness, but a balance of forces where motion became predictable and cycles repeated. Yet even in this stability, there remained a quiet tension, a reminder that all things are temporary on a cosmic scale, that orbits can shift, that stars evolve, that what seems eternal is only enduring for now. And if one could stand again in that distant vantage point and watch across billions of years compressed into a single vision, they would see not a static arrangement, but a living system where planets migrate subtly, where impacts occasionally rewrite surfaces, where atmospheres grow and fade, and where the central star slowly transforms. And in that grand perspective, the origin is never truly separate from the present, because the same forces that drew a cloud together still act upon every object. The same gravity that once ignited a star still binds the planets in their paths. The same collisions that once built worlds still occur, though far less often. And the same delicate chemistry that sparked life continues to evolve, branching into countless forms and possibilities. And perhaps most remarkable of all is that within this vast and ancient system, born from dust and governed by forces that operate without intention, there emerged beings capable of wondering about that origin, capable of tracing back through layers of evidence and imagination to reconstruct the story of how everything began. And in that awareness, the solar system achieves something beyond mere existence because it becomes known, not just as a collection of matter, but as a narrative written in stone, light, and motion, a story that began in darkness and continues still, unfolding not with sudden violence, but with quiet persistence as each orbit completes another cycle. Each year marks another passage around the sun, and each moment carries forward the legacy of a cloud that once drifted without form and chose, through the laws of the universe, to become a system of worlds, a cradle of light, and a place where even the origin itself can be remembered.
And beyond even that awareness, beyond the quiet understanding that arose on Earth, the solar system continued its silent conversation with the wider galaxy, as the sun carried all its worlds along a vast orbit around the Milky Way, moving through regions of space that subtly influenced its structure, passing near other stars whose distant gravity could disturb the fragile outer edges where icy bodies drifted in slow, patient arcs. And though these encounters were rare and gentle on the scale of human perception, over immense spans of time, they reshaped the distant boundaries, nudging comets inward or casting them away into interstellar darkness, ensuring that the solar system was never entirely isolated, but always part of a larger, ever-changing environment. And within that environment, time itself became the quiet sculptor of everything, eroding mountains on rocky worlds,
dimming storms on gas giants and slowly transforming the central star as it consumed its fuel, growing brighter and more expansive in a process so gradual it could only be understood through imagination and memory. And on Earth, life continued to evolve, branching into forms that filled oceans, skies, and land, adapting to every shift in climate and chemistry, surviving extinctions and flourishing in their aftermath, each generation carrying forward the legacy of that first improbable spark that had emerged from a world once molten and inhabitable. And as intelligence arose and began to question its place, the story of the solar system was pieced together from fragments of evidence, from the composition of rocks to the motion of planets, from the light of distant stars to the frozen messages carried by comets, forming a narrative that stretched back to that original cloud, that first collapse, that ignition of light. And yet even with that knowledge, the story remained unfinished, because the future still waited to unfold, and the same forces that had shaped the beginning would continue to guide what came next, as the sun slowly aged, its core changing, its outer layers destined one day to expand outward in a transformation that would alter or consume the inner worlds, turning the stable system once more into a place of fire and upheaval, not unlike its earliest days. And beyond that distant transformation, the remnants would persist, a white-hot core fading over time, surrounded by whatever worlds or fragments remained, drifting through the galaxy as a quieter echo of what had once been a vibrant system of life and motion. And perhaps in some far future, long after memory has faded and the planets have changed beyond recognition, another cloud of dust, somewhere else in the universe, will begin to collapse, repeating the same process, guided by the same laws, giving rise to another star, another set of worlds, another chance for complexity and awareness to emerge. And in that endless cycle, the origin of the solar system becomes not just a single event, but part of a greater pattern, a recurring story written across the cosmos, where destruction gives way to creation, where chaos becomes structure, and where even the smallest particle can, through time and gravity, become part of something vast and enduring. And so, the story continues, not as something that is ended, but as something that is still happening in every orbit, every flicker of starlight, and every moment that passes, carrying forward the quiet legacy of a cloud that once drifted in darkness and became a system filled with light, motion, and the possibility of being understood.